it's working now. We'll just let this ridiculous old cutscene play. I'll pretend that we just started doing this. As for every one of these interviews, it usually begins with 15, 20 minutes of unique troubleshooting. How's it going today, Rory?
Pretty good.
Perfect.
It's been a long day.
It's been a Monday. Yeah. Wait, Monday? Oh, is it your Monday?
I said long day.
Long day. Okay.
My Saturday.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And for the purposes of this, what type of industry would you say you're in?
Supply chain.
Okay.
Makes me sound like a drug dealer.
Yeah, I hand things out. You wouldn't say you work in a creative medium inherently, unless your work is creative. Do you find your work creative?
I wouldn't say traditionally creative.
Sure.
But when it comes down to finding new ways to adapt, improvise, change, you do have to be creative, and you'd be creative in a very refined way.
Sure.
You got very literal limitations.
That makes sense.
Via transportation, manpower, or people power, I should say.
Gotcha. So I guess what I like to try and discuss sometimes is like sometimes our real jobs mix well with creative stuff. You've been doing Tobias in online. You've also been helping me out majorly with the production side of things. Maybe the production side fits with your work, but voice acting is probably not something you do in a day-to-day kind of situation, is it?
Not entirely. I think voice acting is probably my weakest point here. Doesn't have anything to do with people management, time management. A lot of it has to do with myself and overcoming my own insecurities and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But in regards to the job, I do deal with 60, 80, 100 people a day.
Sure.
So I guess public speaking could tie into it a little bit.
No, absolutely. Have you found it rewarding to do something that's a little out of your element, or is it something you're looking forwards to being over so you can be done with it?
No, it's definitely more rewarding, because then again, it ties into my degree as well.
Sure.
Not something I ever really anticipated or dreamt of doing, but being able to bring it all together really is rewarding. It's satisfying for sure.
No, that's fair. For people who haven't been stalking me my entire life, which is almost no one, I very much like to mother Rory about not using his degree enough because he did a very cool film degree and doesn't get to do cool stuff with it enough. So I feel like bringing you the project was just as much me being like an old woman, being like, use it and come and enjoy, you know?
Yeah. No, the degree has helped to a degree. But it's along the lines of communication rather than doing cool stuff with film, which sucks because I would love to continue doing as many little cool things as possible.
Absolutely. But if you look at anyone who gets to that point, it's not like you get to start with your Avatar 2 Way of the Water or whatever, right? Like it's usually a lot of small things moving up in it.
There's Peter Jackson's B-rated horror movie start his career kind of thing.
Oh, okay. I don't know the one.
He did Brain Dead, which is, I think, Italian. It's absolutely god awful. Or Dead Alive, depending on the title, depending on where you are.
Nice. Okay.
I could be wrong, by the way.
No, that it's not about it's not about accuracy, it's about authenticity.
Oh yeah.
You're a big fan of movies, and I know generally you're a horror guy. Do you feel like that's something that you're kind of trying to channel when you're approaching voice acting for the first time? Like you get the benefit of playing the villain, which as far as I know is always like more fun. I've always heard people say it's more fun. I don't know how to attack, by the way. So you're just going to watch me get mauled in Resident Evil while this goes on.
Yeah, just speed run it.
Exactly.
Walk around everything. Yeah, I definitely think the villain is more fun. I think through my entire life, I've always felt somewhat guilty playing the bad guy.
Mm.
So this is definitely a change of pace, uh, out of the comfort zone as well in both ways, the voice acting as well as uh, having to say some very nasty stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That was like there's an element of like from a directing standpoint, it's kind of nice to have somebody who isn't super ingrained in how they want to act and have that all defined, because you get to a situation like you have to say some really horrendous things that obviously you don't feel as a person, but you can kind of come across like chewing on that discomfort compared to just like acting it. And I like authenticity. Maybe that's the punk in me, but I feel like it fits better, especially in an indie project when that comes about authentically.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Um, yeah, no, definitely. Voice acting has probably been the toughest part. Because then again, the first couple chapters, I felt very constrained by just the idea of what I'm supposed to be, who I'm supposed to sound like.
Hmm.
Uh, but as we kind of got more comfortable and things started to progress, it was just you already know how Tobias is supposed to be.
Yes.
He's going to be sleazy. He's going to be greasy. He's going to be intelligent to a degree. Um, you got to, you know, make him feel like he's actually a bad guy.
Absolutely. Do
Yeah.
you feel like there's any like big performances or films that you think about when you're thinking of like a scummy character like that? Is there anything you can relate it back to or maybe channel?
That's a tough one.
I know you have so
Off,
many movies to probably go through. You're
yeah,
like, fuck you, Jeff.
but yeah. Off the top of my head, let's just go with I think it's the Anaconda,
Mm,
Anaconda, with Ice Cube and Jennifer Lopez. I think.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's a guy they hire to take them into the heart of the Amazon, I believe, and he's grizzled, he's greasy, and he'll turn around, stab you in the back if it benefits him. You know, if I get a better place to sleep, he'll stab you, kind of thing.
Okay.
Uh, and I think near the end of the flick, he ends up getting eaten by one of the giant snakes and puked out.
Sure.
And of course, the only thing he can do instead of say "help me" is just wink at one of the characters.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
How do you feel about characters like that? Like, do you feel like you kind of have a moral obligation to see that character end up in a bad position? Like, do villains have to get punished? Do you feel like that has to be a fast and hard rule? Where are you with that type of situation?
I don't think villains need to get punished at all.
Okay.
Way of the world. Obviously, I'd like to see them punished personally.
Yeah.
From an ethical standpoint, I'd rather have the good guys win, the bad guys lose, everyone come out ahead.
Hmm.
But that's not always the case, and uh, my morality doesn't always match up with another person's morality. So you gotta give a little bit of grace, but at the same time, you do want the bad guys to lose. You want the good guys to win. But realistically,
Yeah,
you can't
it's
really.
tough. Because like a villain isn't really a villain if they just like try something and always fail, right? Villainy usually
Yeah,
comes out of having succeeded or getting to make people's lives worse.
yeah,
And
and it might not even be them trying to make someone else's life worse.
yeah.
That just might be the outcome.
No,
Not
that's
the
true.
goal, but the outcome.
Yeah, they just not all villains are intentionally cruel. They just don't care about what happens along the way
Yeah,
and that type of thing. And on the
yeah,
line, we definitely have a lot of different types of villain, and I think that's cool too, because there are some like that are sympathetic, and there are some that you want to just immediately see like drink a muzzler or something or get hit by a
yeah.
car.
I think Tobias is definitely one of those villains, and even talking with the rest of the cast, you can understand they're like, "Oh, this guy again."
Yeah. It's a kind of crap position to be in because, like, as fun as it is to do voice acting, you have to be the one doing terrible things to people. Do you feel like that's colored your experience, or has it made it easier? Maybe just because you have the excuse to be that person.
I think what really helped was the last project we kind of worked on,
Mm,
just the D&D sort of thing.
sure.
Uh, like I said, it's not easy for me to be villains, but sometimes the wrong thing can be the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess in the world you've created with On the Line, to be successful, sometimes you have to be ruthless. Uh, and I'm kind of hoping to see some of that in the future as well with the main cast.
Mm,
But at the same time, it does suck because you'd like to see ultimate good over ultimate evil.
totally. Yeah, I'm fascinated with it for my own reasons because I don't know. I don't think anyone has actually guessed how things are going to end yet, and that's fun. Like that's what you want,
Yeah,
but it'll be interesting to see if everyone does view everyone as a hero that they currently do, because I don't think those things are going to persist. And Tobias is I don't think you could turn him around. Like at a certain point, it might even be offensive to do it. Like it'd be like making Hitler a good guy or something, right? Like you can't do that too much unless you go through a huge redemption arc. But it's interesting that like one little thing can change, and now all of a sudden, maybe this person doesn't seem as bad, or they seem harmless. I don't know if that'll happen to Tobias, but
I think Tobias definitely has. I'm not sure if a survivor's complex is the best thing,
mm,
um, but he's not in the foreground for the most part in Nelf's career.
mm-hmm.
He's in the background. He's trying to shift the balance in Nelf's
Oh,
favor. He's not saying I need to be, front foremost the king, the figurehead, the savior.
mm-hmm.
He's in the background. He's trying to manipulate things to where he can control it,
Totally.
which is definitely where I see him coming from. He's trying to survive. I'm not going to say he's inherently evil quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see where things go. Um, but I think that's his ultimate goal is survival, and he doesn't want to be part of the main grubs.
Yeah. Have you met a lot of people like him in real life?
I'd say no.
No, that's probably a good thing, all things
Yeah,
considered.
I mean everyone's got their good habits and their bad habits,
Mm-hmm. No,
but
that's fair. I guess for me, he definitely represents a little bit of that corporate horror, where
yeah,
I feel like if you have an issue with what he's doing, he would just say, "Oh, you're too emotional." Oh, I'm dead again. That's okay.
yeah, that's at least you got past the first zombie.
Yeah, exactly. Oh well. So, what do you find most rewarding in this project? You mentioned voice acting is the thing that's newest to you. Is that also what you find the most rewarding to like get through and figure out, or where do you sit with those sorts of interactions?
I'd like to say the progress is probably the most rewarding part because of any massive project. It's really tough to get the crew together. It's tough to get the finances together. It's tough to get the pieces together to make an actual episode, and then to go beyond episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and continue
Mm-hmm.
with the same crew is it's a very difficult process, especially over the. I think it's been just over a year since we started this project.
Yeah, it's coming around there. Yep.
Yeah, so that's it's some people get bored, some people get tired, but the progress of everyone sticking around, inviting more people to take part in the project, is the most rewarding. Seeing everything come to fruition.
Yeah, I agree. I've been, and I'm sure everyone has. It's kind of the nature of it, but you end up in groups that have good intentions and don't have the ability to push through it, because it does get tedious at times, and it does get draining, or you have a lot of other things going on, and nobody's ever pushing you to do something creative, so it's so easy to stop. So I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like my background and my degree, the film industry, it's never easy. There's, there could be the creatives who want to push through. There's the people who enjoy the product who want it to push through, but based on finances, work schedules, whatever. Sometimes a really good project might not even get as far as we did.
Totally.
What do they call it? Just production limbo, basically. And I think we've finally broken past that threshold where it's no longer an issue.
Yeah, it is usually those first few, like if it's going to fall through, and then after it becomes a bit of a habit, it is easier. You hope for everyone to just stick with. I like that, even though for the purposes of this conversation now, only chapter 7 has come out, but we're obviously further ahead. And doing the winter break, coming back, it's nice that the pickup is pretty much like you would expect with like a job. I hate to call it that, but everyone just kind of started doing stuff again. It wasn't like, oh, I'm whatever, it is relieving. And you hope that's just because people are having a good time. It seems to be the cast and yourselves have all started to like know each other, and that's fun.
Yeah, no, that's actually really nice too. Is it doesn't have to be like, it's still a bit of a job because you've got the deadlines and the schedules and the work to get done. I was like, but when everyone kind of gets together for a table read or whatever, or even just a general meetup, everyone's like friends.
Yeah,
everyone's interested in the project and getting it done.
absolutely. Now, when we do finish, because I think we finish this year, do you feel like there's, we've had conversations about doing some D&D stuff and things like that, but on your own terms, now that you've kind of got to do more of this, is there anything that you think you would be interested in pursuing if you got the chance?
Definitely, I think to an extent, obviously, with my current career, I'd like to stick with that because that's not going anywhere. But I would like to do some more personal creative activities. Especially through the pandemic, there's a lot of new creative ways on how to make movies.
Sure.
Like they've got, I think there was one called Host, where it was basically just like what we're doing now. It's like the entire plot takes place through web cameras and Zoom or Discord or whichever multitude of programs, and it's an interesting way to tell a story.
No, that's fair.
Especially with the same limitations we've been dealing with through last year, is trying to do all this entire voice acting project online.
Yes. No, that's fair. We don't have the benefit of a home studio where managing everyone's independent, like, tech situation and whatever, which for the purposes of canon is why I am playing Resident Evil and we're not like playing something together. Because I don't think Rory has an excellent computer and he might poop if we had to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's I'd say it's decent, but it's probably the most decent one I've had yet.
Okay, sure.
But it's probably got some graphical limitations and whatnot. Try to play a couple games on Steam and it stutters.
Okay, and you know what? It's not a bad thing to even talk about games, because that is a big part of online as well. Like, it is a creative project, but it's also a nerdy project. Where are you gaming mostly nowadays? I think you're a PlayStation guy.
Yeah, PlayStation guy. Got a PS5. Big into shooters, but I think the biggest portion of joy I find is just from co-op games. So I think Resident Evil was a topic we discussed. Played a lot of Resident Evil 5 back in the day. PS3 days.
Have you beat all of them or just 5?
5 and 6.
5 and 6.
Yeah, I was never a big fan of the controls. I could never figure out how to get them to work.
Yeah, for this game, it's a little egregious compared to modern controls.
Yeah.
I know some people get really, really defensive about tank controls, and like they don't even like Resident Evil at all because it abandoned tank controls.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad it went the way of the dodo. I don't care for it.
I don't either. I think it makes it scarier than it needs to be for all the wrong reasons. Because like you're in a little tiny hallway and you need to sprint around something. It's scary because you don't have ammo and you can't get past. It's not scary because it's actually unnerving. It's frightening. It's terrifying.
Yes. No, I agree with you there. Although it just gave me an interesting idea. It would be fun to like implement that really, really tough to move and deal with things because your character is actually like physically handicapped somehow. Like imagine having to play this game, but your character is in a wheelchair. Like they're a competent, capable person, but they can't move that fast. They can only go backwards and forwards. Like that would be a fun way to bring tank controls into the future. But as this, it's like I don't have kneecaps or something.
Yeah, that's actually kind of funny because I think was it the horror franchise Child's Play, Chucky.
Oh yeah.
One of the newer flicks actually has the main protagonist is actually in a wheelchair.
Oh okay. Oh.
So it kind of is the future. It's like, okay, now you're in modern times dealing with a possessed doll. It's like, how do you escape? It's like you can't because you're in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
You're very, very limited to what you can and cannot do.
I think that is a big thing we find, especially like these old games. And like we have, I think it's chapter 5 where things start to go really crazy and on the line. A lot of the sound effects and things like that are inspired by games like this. And I think, limitation is a good term for what can make them scary. Like even Silent Hill, if you ever played it, the fog is really scary, but it was only there because PS1 sucked and they couldn't process many graphics, right? So like if you can't see very far, it's easier to process what's around you, but that did have such a huge effect on the game. Do you feel like go ahead?
I was just saying it adds to the atmosphere.
Yeah. And do you feel like there's a benefit in the limitations we've been facing, like in how we have to tell our story? Or
I'm definitely a big proponent of that. My biggest interest is like drive-in horror, drive-in movies, just B-rated garbage most people wouldn't want to watch. But if you think about their actual limitations, it's financial. It's they don't have the same studio where they can, blow up stuff like Michael Bay would.
Totally.
The filmmakers have to come up with ridiculous amounts of jerry-rigged stuff just to film a scene. Very, very limited, very, very creative, and people work very, very hard just to, do this B-rated movie that might go straight to DVD or straight to the bargain bin at Walmart.
Sure.
But then some of them have some of the biggest followings you can think of, just because people work very, very hard at creating a story and showing it to people.
No, that's exactly it. I feel like it is important where you can to add quality, to have fitting equipment. But yeah, sometimes the best stuff does come from duct taping two things together and going, okay, this is our discombobulator or whatever.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I would say it doesn't have to be, a multi-billion-dollar production to be good. And it doesn't need a multi-billion-dollar production to work.
No.
Just a little bit of suspension of disbelief and creativity.
Totally. I feel like a lot of creative people are. Oh, I didn't need to examine the body again. Oh, okay, perfect. I feel like a lot of creative people are discouraged by that because they feel like they need to be, producing some Infinity War level saga on their first go. But you kind of like figure out what types of things you want to make by just making small stuff. And you might realize like you don't want to make your first mistake on a big project like that. That's like the worst case situation. It is nice to cut your teeth a bit.
Yeah. And I think was it Evil Dead,
Yeah.
T-shirt wise. I think one of the things they had to deal with was trying to get a steady cam, but they couldn't afford it.
Okay.
So they strapped the camera to a 2x4 and had one operator on either side, and they ran with it. And then, have you seen Evil Dead?
Yeah, the first one, right?
They've got the camera kind of zooming through the forest, doing its thing. That's how they came up with that. That's one of the most iconic techniques in the horror genre. Yeah. And it came from limitations and creative ways overcoming those limitations.
That's totally fair. Now, this is an interesting topic, maybe. Do you feel like, say you're in a situation where they don't have to have those limitations? Say like you're some person's rich kid or whatever, right? Should you enforce those limitations, or do you feel like that disrupts the artistic process just as much?
I think it disrupts.
Okay.
Because I mean, if you've got the resources, you're going to use the resources. But if you don't have the resources, you're going to find your own resources and use those to your own advantage. And I think that's where the whole drive-in horror genre comes in the most, is where you'll use the resources you have, and then you'll have to create the ones you don't have. And I think that's why, that's where creativity comes from. It's unique. It's situational, or dependent on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to be, this rich kid has, millions of dollars. You can make the perfect movie. Whoa. Or the perfect story, or the perfect podcast.
Oh,
mm-hmm.
Oh no!
It sometimes
I didn't mean to do that.
changes things.
You must be from
they might try different things, whatever. But I don't think enforcing limitations is the best way to do things, because I do think it disrupts the creative process.
Well,
Sure.
I'm really sorry.
No,
Are
that
you
totally
all
makes
right?
sense. It may be better to like
Redfield
push
from the Alpha.
and see
Are
what
you the
limitations
only
you can
person here
find
from
at the
the Bravo
scale
team?
you're able to go to than like
Well,
take yourself
because the
down to
helicopter
ones that
made a
might
forced
stop
landing.
other people,
I
because that can
just
be
ran into his
disingenuous
house
too. I'd find
anyway,
it really
but
insulting if some like rich guy was like, yeah, I'm gonna buy a mid-range mic even though I could get a new one just because. I'm like, fuck off.
Well, yeah, because if you had the money, or if I had the money, I'd be going for top tier gear, right?
Exactly. It wasn't after. It's actually one of my only regrets with the series is that I didn't upgrade to like this nice, more production slated sort of mic until I think like episode 6 or 7 was coming out. And it's not a huge deal, but you can tell once you make changes. You're like, oh god.
Yeah. But then again, there's progression as well.
Mm-hmm.
A project we've all been learning on how to deal with is finally starting to go beyond the learning stage and into an organic stage.
Absolutely.
Where it's fluent.
Yeah, and we're just making stuff. And then there's going to come a point just as well where down the line, once we finish doing this from the podcast perspective, we might be doing some re-records and some fine-tuning for the actual like full audiobook sale release. And it'll be interesting, yourself and everyone to look back at what you did at the start of the project and see what you want to change, what you like, what you don't like, because everyone's learning as we go. Even if they're experienced, they're learning the character as we go and all that stuff.
Yeah, and I guess once the story progresses, you'll also have, characters learning who they should have been versus who they thought they were going to be.
Totally.
So that when the re-records come up, or if they do, there's going to be changes in how the character acts.
Totally.
based on context and history and so on.
So with this type of thing, I guess it stands to reason, and because you could
what
like,
should I do now?
you could
If
also
you go out to
reference
search for
these
the other
types of
members, how
directors
about letting me
from the
come
sort
with
of
you?
like director that will really push people and do like 50 takes and, you know, get people to the point where
All right,
it feels natural. I think
Yes,
that's like
sir.
the logic of
I'll
that type
do
of
my
thing, right? It's
best.
like they push it so much it's
I have to
automatic, and then when
prepare
you get
something.
on film or when
Would
you
you like to
record
go ahead?
is as true to the scene as possible. Do you feel like that type of hard push is worth it, or do you feel like just learning characters, doing table reads is a healthier option? Where do you sit on that intensity?
I definitely think the latter is the healthier option. But you know, yourself being a director of this whole thing, you could really push for a different outlook.
Mm-hmm.
You could push characters to act a different way. You can ask the actors to portray them in a specific way. Obviously, I think the way we've been doing it has been creating a more natural character. Because again, it's a bunch of kids or young adults playing video games. They're going to act how they would and do what they would.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely helps. It kind of creates, like I said, a more natural grouping of people because they're all bringing their own insights and outlooks together. Because as a person who plays with a lot of, with a large online community,
mm-hmm.
People are going to play differently. They're going to act differently. You bring in different people into the group. They're going to not exactly change, but they're going to adapt how they act, how they play.
Totally.
And I think having a more rigid directorial outlook might harm that. What do you call it? Might harm their cohesion.
Sure.
Well, what should I do now?
No, I do agree with
If
you.
you go
You
out to
can't
search
be
for
like
the other members, how
act
about
more
letting me come with
casually
you?
or whatever. You know, there's a certain level of like
all right, let's do it.
letting
Yes,
even like.
sir.
So I have a
I'll
pet
do
peeve
my
when it
best.
comes to writing, right?
I
Where
have to prepare
every
something.
single line is always
Would you
perfectly
like to go
spoken, no
ahead?
matter which book it is, which author it is. People edit authenticity out of the way that people construct their sentences because like they stutter and do that and they take a moment to consider what they want to say, and that almost never happens in movies or anything like that.
Yeah.
So it is important to preserve at a certain point. So it probably fits for this project. Yeah. Do you think the super intense push, should that just be a way of the past, or what do you think?
I think that would be project specific.
Okay.
So obviously, if if that's been your technique the entire time and it's been working, I'm not going to say don't do that. But I think with this project, I think doing the table reads, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of soft direction, which helps nurture the authenticity.
Sure.
It doesn't need to be. You need to do this, this, and this, and this to be successful. You're like, hey, from what I was thinking when I wrote this, this is how you should act.
Sure.
And then they're like, oh, okay, I see what you mean. And then it flows more naturally because it's not do this or die. It's let's try a little more on this curve.
Sure.
What is this? Wow.
Nope, that does absolutely make sense. And it does fit too, because we have, it's like it is a volunteer indie project, and there are a lot of people like figuring out what they like about acting and how they want to approach it. So it'd probably be, yeah, I couldn't go. I'm trying to think of the name of the director that does that super intense 50. Is it Kubrick? I think it's Kubrick.
I'm going with you.
Kubrick was definitely a prick.
Let me.
I think Alfred Hitchcock has some. Yeah, I think there's some stories about a lot of the most famous directors too.
Stay alert.
Sure.
Again, they get what they need out of their actors, and it's a great story, great piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it would work for every project.
No.
Because then there's no spontaneity, there's no improvisation. It's just straight up this one person's project rather than a combination of all these people putting together the work to create the piece of art.
What?
Sure.
What is this?
No, that does
What is it?
Blood.
make sense, because sometimes
Jill.
it's overly
Any other clues?
author
I'll
driven,
be
and
examining
there's
this.
no project, like maybe with the exception
Hope
of
this
like
is not
books
criticism.
that you write and edit yourself. Everything ends up having influence from other people in it, whether it be the actors, the editors, the cinematographers, the people who are making the sounds a specific way. They all get a little bite of it.
Yeah, that's true. I think one thing I've learned a lot in the course that I've taken is the biggest thing is a film is more than the sum of all of its pieces.
Mm.
And I think that works for a lot of other things too, because you're right. When it comes to writing a book, you've got the author, the editor, anyone else who says maybe do this instead.
Yep.
It's a lot of little things that go together to create the project as a whole and the meaning beyond that.
No, absolutely. Do you feel like anyone who's creative should be in like a perpetual pursuit of getting away from any of that censorship, for lack of a better word?
Barry?
I don't think so.
No?
What is it?
I think
It's a monster!
Let me
they should understand who they are and what they want. But I mean, like once you create the project, the audience will censor in their own ways, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
Kenneth was killed too.
So it's kind of
point.
The whole curtain is just red.
Anyway,
It doesn't
let's
mean
report
anything to
this
me,
to
sort of
Wesker.
argument. But
sure.
then the next reader will curtains red because they're angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the author had lost their daughter 2 summers before and it was read out. Yeah, like that type of.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I guess even the idea of being able to create something entirely on your own discredits the audience's participation. And that's
Wesker!
unavoidable unless you keep it in a silo.
Help me look
That's
for
going to
him,
be
Jill.
there.
And don't leave this hall for the
Yeah.
time being.
And audience participation is what you're looking for, right?
At a certain point, yeah, it's tough to want to make something just go, okay, we did that, and then never show anyone.
Yeah.
Although it'd be interesting if we did.
I like that. Just have secret project, hide it when you die. Leave a map for one person to take a look.
It's not a horrible idea. Do you feel like you're attracted to sort of like weird esoteric stuff like that? Do you want to leave a puzzle in your will or whatever?
I'm not sure if I'd ever leave a puzzle, but just creating, say, like I create an empire and just leave it to one person or 3 people who haven't worked towards it.
Sure.
Probably isn't my ideal post-life scenario.
Fair enough. So for games like this, you're saying you play mostly first-person shooters. You played some Resident Evil.
Yeah.
What other horror games have you played that, since that's more the genre you like, or what fantasy? Like, have you played a lot of RPGs?
Find anything, Jill?
A little bit. I think the Elder Scrolls were never really my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's probably because Fallout 3 ripped me off.
Now it's
Okay.
Wesker's time to
The ending.
I don't know what's going on.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
can't be helped.
But I think it's more, I'd rather play a game that's more story-based or
Okay. I'll try the door on the opposite
narrative
side.
driven.
This
So when it comes down to, say, RPGs, Elden Ring was a pretty good one.
We should start from the first floor, okay?
Yeah, Elden Ring was fun.
Jill, here's a lockpick.
Yeah, anything like the Elder, not the Elder Scrolls games, what are they?
Take it with you.
The one by BioWare, I can't remember the title. Dragon Age was a good
Maybe
one.
I'll need it.
Oh yeah, I actually just recently restarted playing Dragon Age Origins. It is a fun game.
Yeah, but then again, a lot of the narrative games like Ratchet and Clank, Spyro the Dragon, The Last of Us, I was pretty big into.
This time I'll be there.
Uncharted.
Sure. All right. So in on the line, a lot of the characters they reference video games, especially like if you look at Khan, right? He's a character who video games are more to him than just something to do with his time. They are a central occupation. They're an essential part of his reality. For you personally, where does gaming sit? What does it mean to you?
I guess beyond just a simple time-passing hobby, same thing film would is it's interacting with a narrative even more so than you would a film. It's kind of vicarious in a way. You can do these fantastic things. You can engage with these fantastic people. You can learn a lot of fantastic things.
Mm-hmm.
It's again, like you said, it could be a bit of an occupation of sorts. But then there's also like online co-op, online competitive. You've got communities there where you can meet tons and tons of people and work together.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than just work by yourself in a single player game, I guess.
Sure. So you generally don't play a whole whack of single player? Yeah, I think that's a famous sequence.
It depends. Yeah, it just depends on the game, really. I did a lot of what do they call it? Asymmetrical horror games, like Dead by Daylight was a big one. Again, it's lack of voice chat, playing against a single killer.
Sure.
That was a lot of fun working with people to complete objectives. But then when it comes down to horror games, I've always found it more fun to have another person, sitting on the couch next to you.
Sure. No, that makes sense.
One of my fondest memories was Dead Space with a buddy, 3 a.m.
Nice. Just beat the whole game?
Yeah. Yeah, we beat it all in one night.
Yeah, it's Dead Space 2 and 3 that have co-op, right? I don't think the first one does.
I can't recall about number 2, but I know number 3 does for sure.
Yeah. No, those games do fit horror really well. And I think there's a big following of people who just do like let's plays of horror games. Because sharing that, I don't know if it makes it less scary or if it's just easier to share that horror. Something about it is appealing, definitely.
Yeah, I think if you bring it back to film, the way it was, first originally seen as it the only way it should be is just sitting in a theater with a group of people sharing the experience.
Sure.
And I think the Let's Plays definitely show that for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
On a bit more of an exponential sort of scale.
Yes, it is the case. And it's funny to me, actually. And I imagine it's just because of licensing and distribution and stuff. Like, having a video game and playing it and letting other people watch it isn't the same as owning it yourself. But doing that for a movie is effectively. You're getting the same experience. So you can't do a let's watch a movie together. Although I would probably find that just as interesting. Somebody going through the whole thing, pausing, talking about it. And I think they did that back in the day, right? Like they would release tracks that you would play over your
the commentaries.
Yeah.
Actually, you go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I remember finding there's like dudes and you download files and they would, create almost commentaries, but you would have to like listen to it alongside the movie, and that was the whole intention. It's just an interesting thing.
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah, you've actually got stuff like Monster Vision, like Elvira did a little bit, Joe Bob Briggs did a little bit, where during the commercial break, they talk about the context, the movie, the actors, the genre. Then you had Mystery Science Theater 3000, which had the little, little people at the beginning in the front background making fun of the movie. So I don't think Let's Plays are new.
No.
But I think it's definitely got its roots in cinema for sure.
You're right. Barry, thanks
No,
for saving my
I would
life.
agree with you there. Probably a bigger question, but do you feel like video games will ever fully supplant film, or are they kind of definitively their own things in their own direction, even if they have crossover?
I think they're definitely always going to stay a little bit separate, but I think they're definitely starting to overlap in different areas for sure.
Yeah,
because I think Netflix did a special like Bandersnatch a couple years ago, where
sure.
you get to like choose your own adventure movies.
Yep, that's true. And like I grew up reading like choose your own adventure books and stuff. I remember I had a bunch of like Spider-Man ones. You're like, if you want Spider-Man to do this, go to page 142. Yeah. So yeah, that level of interactability has always been there. But even the crossover, you don't think film is going to die out once video games get to a certain point?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Do you have any reasoning for that, or just your personal belief?
Personal belief for sure. Anyways, I'll be right back. Gotta take care of something real quick.
Oh yeah, sure.
It's worst timing ever.
We're back. Rory had to deal with this cat. Honestly, if only you could like actively move your camera, it would have been great to follow you and your cat.
Yeah, thing's a little monster. Definitely likes to play with the fish tank I got over in the corner there. Had to get a waterfall filter just so the cat could drink out of it.
Sure.
But yeah, I think back on topic, film and video games as a unit almost. I think there's definitely a bit of play trying to get the two intermingled. So you've got the story-driven games like you just play it all the time. I can't even remember anymore what the title is.
Maybe describe it.
Yeah, it's the one French game. I think there was a lot of rain. Heavy Rain.
Heavy Rain, like Indigo Prophecy and those games.
Indigo Prophecy, and then they've got some more games coming out by the same people. They've got one about a Wendigo and also the little fun stuff.
They've gotten better than they were, but yeah, those are still interesting. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, like again, very narrative-based games. You have very limited control of what you can and can't do. You can interact with the story world and in effect the narrative, but for the most part, it's very, very constrained. Whereas, say, Elden Ring, you have to find the narrative. You have to, develop it as you go, kind of thing. Discover, I should say. So the narrative isn't the main point of the game, whereas Heavy Rain, the narrative is the game. And how you can control it.
Oh, no, that's totally correct. Yeah. There is sometimes, that can be part of it. And I guess that's the benefit of a game, is you can even turn just a narrative into a unique enough experience that's still defined as a game. Like, You can look at Indigo Prophecy or what's the new one with the robots? Human something or other.
I know which one you're talking about.
That's probably not even the name of it, but like you look at that, and even though it
Detroit
is
Beyond Human, I think
Detroit
that's the
Beyond Human,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember playing that, and it was actually, I think it was the best of those ones. Like, I like Indigo Prophecy or Fahrenheit, depending on where you are, because it was just so janky, and like, as you go through it, it gets really stupid, and it probably has that B-movie appeal you were talking about, right? Because like, there's a point where you're like fighting ghost beetles, and then by the end of it, you're basically Goku. It's a ridiculous story. But it was fun for that. Detroit was the most grounded, and even then, I wouldn't define it as a movie, even though it takes a lot from film. So it probably proves your point that they are so distinct, they can literally steal from each other and still be themselves.
Yeah. But I mean, there's always that debate back in the day, would color change film, would sound change film, and then all of a sudden just like, could interaction change film? So I'm not going to say absolutely not, but I think they are very distinct mediums that could definitely overlap in a lot of ways for sure. Like Metal Gear Solid 4. It's more movie than game.
It is. I'm also so sad that it's like trapped, because like the only way to play it is on PS3 right now. It hasn't been ported to anything, but it's such a good game that's like, you want to play it.
Yeah, I think PlayStation has it on their online catalog, but you can only stream it. You can't download it, and that's the biggest thing. Is if you don't have near perfect internet, the entire time you're playing, it's kind of laggy.
Great.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking for sure.
Although Kojima is going into film now, do you think that was an eventuality? Just like it was going to happen?
I'm not sure how well he'd do with like live action, but I think animation could definitely be a strong suit.
Yeah.
Because with animation, you have full control over the entire world and what's shown.
He would probably prefer animation compared to having to deal with the frustration of floppy bodies not being exactly where he wants them. It could be the case, yeah. Although I thought he was doing a Death Stranding live action. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes.
I definitely think that would be interesting for sure.
Just because, like, have you played Death Stranding? Or Death Stranded?
I played a little bit, yeah.
It is very cinematic.
A little bit. I think that's his biggest thing, though, is I think, what was it, the one project he was doing with Silent Hill or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, PT or whatever, playable teaser.
Yep.
It was terrifying and still very cinematic at the same time.
Totally. And really ahead of its time, too. Yeah, like he did that, and then the entirety of Resident Evil 7 and 8 happened to occur afterwards. Now, they claim they were developing at the same time, and it's just a coincidence, but there are some overlap, let's say.
Yeah. I tried playing a little bit of Resident Evil 7, I think it was, or Resident Evil 7. Still very interesting. I think prior to that they did Outlast. Outlast had the first person run through the halls sort of thing.
Yep.
I think first person definitely changes horror. A little bit scarier, because then it first person. No, but I would really like to see some more third person horror games.
Yeah, I think they're. I know we're gonna get a resurgence for sure. At least in this one, I'm feeling, because I just beat Callisto Protocol. They're remastering Dead Space. Resident Evil 4 is coming out. The remaster of that. I feel like there is a demand for it. You're right. And it kind of leads me to a question that might be interesting. We've talked a lot about horror because that tends to be something you like. And On the Line has included some horror. Do you feel like genres get to a point where they can't just be themselves? Like, do you think there's ever going to come a point where so many horror movies have been made that you can't just make a straight horror movie. You have to make a horror fantasy movie. You have to make a horror sci-fi movie. Or can stuff remain pure?
I think it's just as pure as the audience sees it. And I think the biggest thing would be just critical reaction or reception for horror movies. Is a lot of the times if it's a good horror movie, they'll say no, it's a thriller, or they'll say no, that's not horror, that's something else. That's a period piece with Robert Eggers' The Witch. Again, you got the bulk of the film, like The Witch, for example, was, I think that was straight up horror.
Mm-hmm.
But then somebody might call it a period piece or a thriller or whatever. But like when it comes down to like genres, like it doesn't have to. You don't have to break it down to its like absolute core pieces. Because again, could still be science fiction, could still be horror, could still be an action movie.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it has comedy doesn't make it an action comedy or an action or a horror comedy.
No, I would agree. Or sometimes like things feel less authentic because they're overly focusing on that one thing, right? Like if you're afraid of being funny, if you're afraid of there ever being light in a scene, everything has to be grim and dark and gritty, you might make a horror movie that's so silly you can't take it seriously or something like that,
Well,
you know?
what should I do now?
Yeah, I think
I'll
that's
have to
definitely the
search for
case.
the
There's
other
a
members. How about letting me come with you?
lot of little things that people try to do to get around certain
All right.
genre conventions.
Yes, sir. I'll do my best.
But then
I have
they
to do
go
a hair
too far
salon.
beyond,
Would you like to go
and
ahead?
then you're like, the audience expectations kind of go out the window, and no one knows what they're trying to do with the story.
No, that's totally fair. Where do you think, like, if you had to wager a guess, where do you think On the Line is going to end?
I'd like to say that they get. How much are we supposed to reveal in this interview?
You can only talk up to chapter 7.
Okay.
I know that's a tough one.
Yeah. I do feel like they're going to get the world back to normal.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you're gonna. I don't think you're the kind of guy to go through. Oh, it was all a dream.
Mm-hmm.
Because that takes the entire threat out of the entire, narrative. But I do think they're gonna get their world back, and I'm not sure if, like you said, everyone's gonna remain a conventional hero.
Yeah. And should they even be? Would it be too plain to have them just be perfect heroes?
Yeah.
Another chew my face off. Jeez.
I mean, I can't remember what that movie's called, but it's got was it Jack Nicholson on the stand? He's like, you can't handle the truth. Have you seen that one?
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
like a general in the war, and he's like, I did the dirty things because you fucking couldn't.
Yeah, Tom Cruise is in that too, right? I can't remember.
I think so.
I can't remember the name of the movie, but I do know the one that you're referencing, yes.
But yeah, I think that's kind of the route we're going to go. Not everyone's going to like the outcome, and that's totally okay. That's almost exciting. But then not everyone's also going to be a hero. They're all going to contribute to saving the world, but they're not going to be heroes at the end of it. And I think that's kind of what reality needs, is to show you that, just because you don't like what they did doesn't mean they're actual bad people.
Yeah.
And just because they did something good doesn't mean they're actually good people.
No, totally. It's probably like a really interesting point to make somebody making a perfectly reasonable, maybe slightly selfish, but human decision, and letting somebody see that as pure horror, if it is, or let them be afraid of that, because it goes to show how small and insignificant something can like really have a big impact, or something not being reacted to can be a lot scarier than something else, depending on the person. Who knows?
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, you know what, Rory? I appreciate you taking the time to do the interview today. I appreciate all of your time figuring out voice acting, helping the production side. You've helped do the review as well to keep everyone doing their lines, and I've appreciated that because it is a project that keeps on growing in scope the more we figure out how to do it ideally. So you've been a big part of making that successful and easy. Again, thank you for taking the time today. If there's anything you want to say here at the end of the interview, feel welcome to. But otherwise, I just wanted, appreciate your time and hope you have a good one.
No, I definitely appreciate everything, really. The ability to take part in this, the ability to take part in the backstage processes, work together. There is a lot of little things I think, or a couple little things we've worked on before that always gave me hope for something more.
Yeah.
And I'm very glad to actually take part in that something more now.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful, wonderful project. Everyone else is phenomenal as well. So again, thank you, actually.
Yeah, it's fun to work together. I like being able to find something to do. And we do have a great cast. So it's been great on a lot of sides.
Yeah. Back on the topic of co-op, thank you for being cooperative.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's wonderful to bring something I've worked very, very hard to deal with and bring it into this project. So that's phenomenal. And thank you again for the opportunity.
Sweet, man. All right.